Hi everyone, my name is Jocelyn and I'm sorry I can't be there with you today, but I have a small baby, so I'm going to do a virtual presentation for you. It's called Wellbeing in a Digital Age, and I'm going to talk to you about the 3M's of digital nutrition, and I'm going to start by telling you what digital nutrition actually is. Very quickly, who am I exactly and why am I here talking to you? I'm a school counsellor, so I'm a psychologist and a qualified teacher. I work in private practice and I research the impacts of technology. Um, that's me in a nutshell. I do a lot of different projects and different activities. So I guess why all the panic about kids or humans and technology and technology addiction? This whole idea of a zombie apocalypse that's coming, that we're all, glued to our screens. And I guess the main answer to that is brains and brain development. We're really concerned about the impact on our brains and therefore our general mental health and well-being. Digital nutrition is something that I came up with in about 2013 when there was a rise of the conversation around digital detoxing and digital diets and the need to really watch what we were doing online. It's part of digital citizenship. So this model that you can see here is from the education department in about 2011. They've sort of gone to a different model, but I really like the way that this is represented. And a lot of what we spend time talking about is around cyber safety and cyberbullying. And you can see that my digital nutrition stuff sits within the digital health and wellbeing space. It's an area that, while there's a lot of, panic around this concept of addiction, we don't spend a lot of time talking about how to have a healthy relationship with technology, which is what I'm trying to start doing more of in this, bigger context of digital citizenship, which again, in Australia, we don't spend a lot of time doing. So, put most simply, what is digital nutrition about? It's about preventing internet addiction, and I've got a couple of asterisks there. One is that it's not simple, and the second one is that internet addiction in itself is a very contentious term. It's highly disputed from a clinical point of view. Sure, in pop psychology we talk about it a lot, but from an actual clinical point of view, addiction is a very tricky subject. It's a subject for a whole nother presentation in itself. Less simply, again, this is about nuances. This is about the complexity of brains and the complexity of our tech use. I use the analogy with food to help steer us away from this obsession with screen time as just a metric and counting digital calories, just being, looking at it from a very narrow point of view. This is all about designing savvy digital habits and keeping us at the control of our tech use, remembering that our tech use is a choice and technology is a fantastic servant but a terrible master. It's also a little bit about understanding that the mechanisms that are used to keep us in the apps and basically keep us scrolling and swiping are, designed to make it addictive, addictive in terms of engaging, compelling, and all of those sorts of things, kind of like poker machines, I guess. And, really kind of make us a little bit more savvy about what ethical tech design might look like and start to put pressure on some of the developers to think about including that in what they design for us. So if we have a think about the food analogy, we all know what these food pyramids are. We probably have a sense of how we should be eating, even if we aren't eating along, those sorts of guidelines. But when I present this, kids always know what this is about. We also know a lot about fad dieting and that they don't work. So things like paleo is a very ineffective and confused system by which to try and lose weight. When we think about these concepts, dieting and detoxing, it's all about like really negative wording, and it comes with a whole bunch of negative associations. So I talk about the idea that digital abstinence and detoxing is impractical and ineffective. Having a positively framed approach to our online consumption choices is a lot more empowering. And it's about creating those healthy habits from the start, not having to put restrictions in place. So, there's a lot about digital detoxing out there, and the question really is technology toxic, and are detoxes effective? What we usually see is most people binge when they come back online after a detox. So if you think about if we are what we eat, that whole concept, if you eat lots of burgers, then what would you expect how would you expect your body to react? These are some questions that I would consider in terms of what does consuming technology then do to our brains. So how do we consider more effectively the impacts of technology from a cognitive, social and emotional perspective? How do we develop healthy tech habits that negate that need for digital detoxes in the first place? I really am quite excited and obsessed with the idea of imagining that if apps and games came with nutritional labels, and what would those nutritional labels look like? And I'll talk about virtual vitamins in a minute. And how do we feed our mind the best information and ideas? And again, best inverted commas, it's really about appraising the information in a world that is so rich in information or content. And how do we actually make sense of all of that? And that comes back through in terms of digital literacy and all the different literacies that we're talking about in this day and age. So I feel like how much screen time is completely the wrong question. We really need to forget this digital calorie counting. Screen time is a really simplistic metric. And when you think, what a 7-year-old's doing online compared to, say, a 17-year-old sitting in the HSC, giving them one sort of 2-hour block of time online really overlooks a whole bunch of complex issues that I think are worth looking at. We really need to think about what does a healthy digital diet look like? What's a healthy relationship with technology like? So what I sort of start to think about and encourage people to think about is that some online activities are superfoods and others are empty calories. And I won't go into that today, but I have a TED talk, a TEDx talk that you might like to have a look at that goes into that in more depth about the hunt for digital superfoods. So what I suggest people consider instead is the content of what's being consumed online. Is it developmentally appropriate? Is it, a 7-year-old playing an R-rated game? The context, so the situation that the tech use is actually occurring in, looking at the bigger environment. Is it in the bedroom alone, unsupervised, talking to people who maybe are not really who they say they are? Or is it in a classroom where you're collaborating and you have a trusted adult who's, relatively supervising what you're doing? The cognition, so the thoughts, the motivations, the intentions, what's going along with those activities. Are they adaptive or maladaptive? This generally applies, say, to maybe looking at photos on Instagram and the kinds of things, the self-talk that you might be having when you're scrolling through the different things in your feed. It might be that you're participating in online forums or you're talking and chatting to other people with similar interests. And so that's actually really motivating and helps you feel really connected. Much more adaptive, obviously. And finally, the function. So what's the reason for the tech use? Why are you online to begin with? Is it to avoid social interaction? Are you gaming because, for instance, you feel really socially phobic because you've been bullied? Or is it that you're actually just studying your backside off? So we need to think about sorting the digital candy from the digital kale, and obviously that's not kale, that's broccoli, but you get the idea. The online supermarket is an incredibly busy place. So there's over 1.7 million apps and games that are available in those Play stores. And it's really hard to know what to look for within the apps and games. There's no credentialing system. The only credentialing system is really the popularity of those and the review and rating systems that sort of get forced down your throat when you log on and look at those. Increasingly, there are organisations who are looking to appraise the apps and games, especially from an educational context. And there's a lot of work happening in the mental health space to say, well, is that brain training game or is that mental health game actually going to help you? And what do we need to be aware of when we're actually, when we're using those, especially with mood disorders and depression, suicidality and things like that. So increasing attention going into really having a think about the efficacy and doing some research to back up the claims that are made by apps and games. So given that there's so much out there, what perhaps are the virtual vitamins that we could be thinking about and looking for within those activities that we're doing online. So we really need to evaluate the ingredients, the cognitive ingredients, so to speak, of those activities and credential them better. I've got a little activity that I do with young people when I present to them around coming up with some of these virtual vitamins. And again, I've got a presentation that I did at Twitter headquarters last year introducing my first 3 virtual vitamins. So you can find that pretty easily. Finally, in the last few minutes of this presentation, I'm going to walk you through what I call the 3M's of digital nutrition. These are 3 things that I think that if you applied to your online activities and created some online habits around these, it'd positively shape them in a way that your tech use could be a little bit more empowering and a little bit more purposeful. So the first one that I have is mindful. So mindful in that you're present to your actions, that you have awareness of and responsibility over what you're doing online. So rather than having mindless scrolling and just kind of losing lots of time into that rabbit hole of the internet, I was looking up how big the internet is the other day, and it was like some ridiculous number I couldn't actually even fathom, like it's as big as space or whatever. It's also important, I guess, from this mindful perspective to have an understanding of how this impacts not just your life and aspects of your life, but also on other people. So when you're spending lots of time online, how does that impact your family? And again, this isn't just about the kids. This is just as much about the adults and the parents and carers and things than the kids, because we're constantly role modeling this to them, just like we role model, you know, what we wear and how we do our makeup. And we can think about, you know, little ones and how they mimic our actions, you know, with their makeup and dress ups and things like that. So this impact of other people and vicarious tech use, the impact of that. So mindfulness is about metacognition, the ability to think about your thoughts, which is a very high-end kind of thing, reflection, noticing, and all of those sorts of things. Mindfulness, you know, I'm talking about being mindful, not from a doing mindfulness, and I know that that's very, very popular at the moment. And again, that could be a whole nother presentation on how to do mindfulness. It's not so much about mindfulness, but being present and aware. Definitely there are lots of different mindfulness apps that you can even get, which is, again, very meta. The second one is meaningful use of technology. So meaningful in that you have a sense of purpose and clarity in regard to what you're actually consuming. You have a bit of a sense of why you're going online, what the goal is, what you're trying to achieve. The activities contribute even in a small way to your goals and values. So if you are constantly consuming particular types of information, maybe on body image or maybe on food or maybe on, you know, your particular niche interests, that I guess all builds up and to all of those things build up to how you use your time, but again, what you fill your mind with, and then how you think and different habits and patterns of thinking. By having meaning and being aligned to those goals and values, this is a little bit linking into positive psychology around the PERMA model of positive relationships and meaning in your life. And positive psychology, we know, is another thing that's quite popular in schools. So thinking about what's really important, what are your priorities, and how do you live aligned to those things. Finally, moderate. So moderate is really discussing or thinking about the idea that you're able to regulate your habits and your usage. So this is this idea of social and emotional learning or self-control. Very old school things, but things that I'm researching as part of my master's. So can you temper the way that you respond to others online? Can you avoid the negative impacts across other aspects of your life? So it's, you know, just not moderate use in terms of time, but moderating your own reactions. And that leads in, I guess, and feeds into the whole concept of trolling and the way that we sort of get moral outrage and become social justice warriors and things like that online. We have very different responses when we feel anonymous or we don't actually have that face-to-face contact. So moderating our responses. This is the idea of a kind of Goldilocks principle, a balanced or just right amount for you at your particular, you know, stage of life. whether it's from developmentally, but also what you do maybe in the holidays is really, really different to the night before an exam. So again, putting it in the broader context of how we use technology. It's all about finding the balance, and some people would say that complete abstinence is actually easier than perfect moderation. So finding that balance is very, very difficult for some. So that's my 3M's of digital nutrition. There is tons more of this information and ideas and resources and different hacks and habits and activities on the digital nutrition website. I have a newsletter, I do seminars for parents, I do in-servicing for teachers, play shops for students. I've got lots of different articles, my little videos of talks and things like that. So I love hearing from people. I love your questions. I love your feedback. I love your examples or stories. So please do get in touch. I'm across pretty much all of the social media platforms except Snapchat because I still haven't worked out how to use it. But yeah, I hope you have a fun rest of your evening, and please do get in touch if you need any resources. Thank you.